So good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here to present to you. I'm a second-year PhD candidate in the group of Web Information System. Also today I'm going to present my work relating to the optimization of machine learning-based inference queries. So this work is done together with Marios Frecolis, Alessandro Bozon, and Asterio Kasifodimos. So let's begin. So nowadays we all use machine learning models, and sometimes we are using it without noticing it. For example, it has been applied in Google Maps, Google Assistant, or Alexa, etc. So there are also abundant of applications of machine learning models. So for example, it can be used to recognize image or speech recognition, or for doing recommendations. So in the last decades, there's a huge surge of research being done in the field of deep learning and generative machine learning. So it has been recently easy to deploy or train a model nowadays. So on the one hand, we have some platforms or products that have been built to manage the models in the development process. So for example, we have the ModelDB. And so these kind of products can help us in this MLOps cycle. So it can help us to configure, package, and monitor the models during the development process. While on the other hand, we also have a host of pre-trained models. So these models can be found in many platforms, for example, Hugging Face, where you have more than 17,000 models. And we have TensorFlow Hub or PyTorch Hub. These could be more familiar to most of the developers. So the pre-trained models in this platform are available for developers throughout the globe. So to look at one of these platforms closely, we take Hugging Face as an example. So when you click on this homepage, you see a lot of small blocks with different kind of machine learning models. So if you click, for example, for image classification, you can see there's 123 models that Hugging Face has provided to us. So if you look closer to these models, you can click on one of these small blocks, and then you can see the description page. So in this description page, you can see the information about this model. So it have a small short description of how this model is designed and what is the structure. So, and also it introduced the use of the model, and also including the limitations. For example, there's some bias in the in aspect of gender. And also they include information about how they train a model. For example, the data they use, for example, in image classification, they may use ImageNet as the training model. And in the end, they will also cover the evaluation results. So usually they will cover the accuracy for this task. For example, for object detection model, they will show the mean average precision to indicate the performance of this model. But there are also some limitations on the description in this model repository. So as we can see that in real deployment, speed also matters. So in all of these model repository, they lack of information regarding the inference cost. For example, how much time you need to run in order for one image or for one model inference. And although it may differ when you are executing on different hardware settings, but they do not even offer the flops, which is quite an objective matrix that indicating how many operations you need to inference one model. So this can be regarded as an objective matrix to indicate the complexity of the model, but we do not see any information about this. And another aspect is that the lack of other necessary metadata. For example, what is the input of the model, and also what is the output of the model. So they only offer it in the TensorFlow Hub, but not for all of these repositories. So if you want to look at it, you have to go through the code. And another aspect about the necessary metadata is the performance across the object classes. So as in the case of, for example, in Google Model Card for Cloud API, they indicating that for some models, the model execute a high accuracy for some classes, for example, like animals, for for example, like cars or person. But on the other hand, they show a lower performance in terms of classes, for example, toys and food. So for some users who would like to detect food in some applications, they have to train a new models in order to fit the need. Although we see there's a lot of state-of-the-art model that can provide a general good performance, but this is not enough. So in this paper, we are stressing the need of these emergence model repository, and also we would like to stress the trade-off between accuracy and execution time of this model. So for example, in these plots, we see in the x-axis are the time it needs for one model inference on the GPU. For y-axis is the overall mean average precision, which indicates the accuracy for this model. So as we can see that these models are diverse across accuracy and execution time. And for example, there's a model, they achieve a high accuracy, but they suffer from a really long execution time. And vice versa, we have models that is really fast run, but achieve relatively low performance in terms of accuracy. So in general, there's no model that can outperform the others in terms of both objectives. So when in deployment, so the user have to be careful what models they choose and how they optimize the trade-off between these two objectives. So given that we have dozens of models available nowadays, and the thing is that we realize that it's increasingly complex to select optimal model combinations for a specific inference task. For example, in this case, we propose an example query, for example, to detect a red car or a yellow bus. So imagine that we have a series of images that contain different kinds of objects. So the goal for now is that given a query plan, so we have to generate a query plan. So in this example, for example, for each predicate, we might have dozens of models available to answer this predicate. And these models are different in terms of accuracy and runtime. And also, of course, one model can answer multiple predicates. For example, a model can answer to detect a car or a bus. So the difficulty here is that given all these available models, how do you select the models for each predicate in order to answer this query and also fulfill the constraint? Sometimes the constraint will be the accuracy target or some certain execution time constraint. So the goal, of course, is to find the objects that can fulfill the query. So to simplify this problem, we formalize the model repository. So in this model repository, we mainly look at two aspects. The first is the accuracy of this model, and also we look at the execution time of this model. So for example, for model that can answer a predicate, then we indicate the accuracy. Otherwise, the accuracy will be 0. The same case goes to the execution time. So if a model can answer a predicate car, and then we indicate its execution time. Otherwise, it will be infinite in terms of the execution time. So given a query and a model repository, our goal in general is to generate query plans for these machine learning-based inference queries. And we aim to tackle the problem of optimal model selection and also including predicate ordering. So we aim to satisfy this query under some accuracy and execution time constraints. So to look at the same example, so we have tried to detect a red car or yellow bus. So in the original query plan, we offer multiple options for each predicate to choose from. So we haven't decided which one to choose. So in this work, we propose 3 approaches. So the first one is the greedy approach. So by saying greedy, you just simply select the one, for example, with the highest accuracy for one predicate. So in this mode, for example, in this, they will generate a query plan like this. So we will explain some details in the following. So a second approach is the model optimizer. So compared to the previous one, as you can see, the model is selected in this mode is different. So for example, for predicate car and bus, they select different models to answer it. And our third approach is called order optimizer. So in this approach, we consider the selection of model and also the order of predicate. So by saying order predicate, we apply a bypass technique, so as indicating in this plot. So for example, the execution order of this predicate actually does make an impact on the final query plan. So as you can see, the yellow could be executed first and then following different paths where we rely on the results for each predicate. So let's look at one by one in details. So for a greedy approach, we first select the Pareto optimal models. So by saying Pareto optimal model is that these are the models that cannot outperform all the other models in terms of both accuracy and execution cost. So these can be relatively optimal in terms of at least one of the objectives. And from these selected models, from the remaining models, we loop over every predicate. And for each predicate, we greedily select a model for if we have a constraint on accuracy, and then we will select the least execution time. And on the other hand, if we have a constraint on execution time, then every time we will greedily select the most with the model with the highest accuracy. So this process goes on when every predicate have found its model and also the constraint is satisfied. So our second approach have applied mixed integer programming to model the problem. So we model the accuracy of the query. So for the relation between red car can be indicating like this. And so this is the accuracy model for this query, red car or yellow bus. And we also model the execution time of the model. So we rely on the model assignment variables. So this is a matrix where we have a mapping between model and predicate. So if the model is selected to answer predicate 1, the corresponding cell will be 1. So I will not go into the details here, but we also model the cost execution time for the model. And in the end, we are trying to maximize the accuracy or minimize our execution time given our certain constraint. So our last approach is considering not only model selection, but also considering the order of the predicate. We also apply a mixed integer programming here. So we order the model, the order of predicates. So as you can see, we use another variables to indicate the order of the different predicates. So given that, for example, if this is the results for the variables, the meaning of these variable indicating the order of the predicates. So in this case, the order of the execution order is red car and followed by yellow and bus. So for the columns are the index for different steps. And also we have a variable indicating the model selection. So the details would be will not be described in this talk, but if you're interested, we can have a discussion afterwards. So when we are modeling for the last case where which is for the order optimizer, we compared to the previous modeling, we consider one more attribute. So we are not only considering cost and accuracy, but we also consider the selectivity for each predicate. So as you can see, for each predicate, it have a corresponding selectivity. So we do not cover like how we detect the selectivity for each predicate, because there's a lot of research have been done on, for example, cardinality estimation. So we not cover here. So we assume that we have already have the information about the selectivity of predicates. So why selectivity matters here in this case matters when we try to order the predicate. So to look at this example, we use the same example here. So imagine that the final results given to us is the predicate as shown here. So the execution order is yellow car and red and bus. So the first predicate to be answered is yellow, and by detecting its answer, we have true or false. So whether this image contains the object which is with yellow color or without yellow color. So we have two types of situations. So whenever we have a yellow here, then the queries that is left to be answered is as shown here. So, and the remaining proportion of data to be detected or to be processed is indicating as a selectivity of yellow. So because this is when yellow is equal to true. But on the other hand, if yellow is false, then the corresponding query left to be answered is indicating like this. And the next predicate to be answered is car. And the same process goes through. And for each time, we identify the queries to be answered. And also we identify the proportion of data to be executed in each step. So the next predicate will be red and follow with a bus. So this is the entire execution tree in total. And based on this tree, actually we can identify what would be the proportion of data to be executed at each step. For example, in the step of predicate yellow, so yellow, the predicate yellow have to be applied on all the data. So the proportion will be 1, and also apply to car. So since car have to be executed in both branches, so the proportion also indicating as 1. But for red, as you can see, the proportion to be executed here is indicating by these two terms. So if we compute them, add them together, it gives us a proportion of the selectivity of car. And we translate into the condition, and it means that predicate red can only be executed when predicate car, the answer of the predicate car is equal to 1. So the same will apply to bus. So we computed a proportion to be left to be computed is like this, and the condition translated is that whenever you want to process predicate bus, the condition would be whenever yellow is equal to 1 and car or red is equal to 1. So we are proposing here is that because here selectivity actually influences the proportion of data being executed at each step. So selectivity actually make an impact on our cost models. So in the end, actually make an impact on our final query plan. So when we are modeling a query plan, the selectivity is one important factor to influence the final results. So which give us a optimal query plan like this. So we have done some experiments to check out the accuracy and execution time for different query plan. So we test on a query generated from a COCO classes, which have 80 classes in general, and we evaluate our query on the validation set. So in total, we generate 125 variants, model variants, and these models are generated from a reference model, which is YOLO v3 and YOLO v5. So we show the results of one example query. So we show the accuracy and execution time of this query. So for this constraint, it indicates the minimum execution time it needs to generate for all approaches to generate a query plan. So lower than this constraint, there at least one approach cannot output a cannot output a query plan. So from this, we try to relax the constraint by increasing the execution time. So as you see, this is more relaxed constraint. So as we can see from this plot, so when a constraint is limited or is quite restrict, we see a similar performance in terms of accuracy for all the approaches. So when the constraint is more relaxed, as we can see that although there's a small decrease in accuracy in terms of the order optimizer, but they have a large gain in the execution time. So it's more efficient to run if we apply the order optimizers. So we also done other experiments in terms of the minimum execution time budget. So for example, in this case, if we have a constraint on execution time, so we here show that what would be the most restricted execution time for different approaches. So as you can see, so for most of the time, our optimizer, order optimizer can generate a query plan with the most restricted execution time constraint. But on the other hand, the greedy approach would have a lose execution time constraint. So on the other, the same case goes to the other scenario where we have constraint on accuracy. So under the same execution constraint, our order optimizer can always produce a query plan with the lower execution time. So we need a lower execution time budget. So we also compare the time it needs to generate a query plan. So as it is seen here in this plot, our greedy approach is always is the fastest to generate a query plan, while for model optimizer and order optimizer, it takes longer. For order optimizer, it's even an exponential growth when the number of predicates in a query kind of scales. And for when we have constraint accuracy, we do not even finish when we have predicates more than 16 and 32. So for now, we are working on proving this problem to be NP hard, and we are also working to simplify the modeling part, for example, to apply approximation at some of the modeling stage. So in general, we motivate that the model repository is important, and the model repository should not only provide us with available pre-trained models, but also provide us with the metadata description. For example, the input and output of the model, and also the inference speed for this model under some certain hardware settings, and of course, the performance across different classes. And also we propose 3 query optimization strategies. So we evaluate them on the model repository, which is generated from real models, which is variance from YOLO v3 and YOLO v5. And these, and also the query is defined from the classes from COCO dataset. So in conclusion, our greedy optimizer is the fastest to generate a query plan, but our order optimizer performs better when we have a really tight constraint compared to the other approaches. So if you're interested in the modeling part of this problem, so I'm happy to have a discussion afterwards. And so for today, this is my talk. Thank you very much.